DevOps maturity is a gradual process of adopting new tools and best practices to move towards more agile and automated workflows. In this session, we will look at how teams can assess their maturity and the key actions that teams can take to become more mature in their DevOps processes. We'll also look at why it's important to implement robust DevOps processes and tools. So, you've probably heard more and more about DevOps, and that's because there has been an unprecedented shift in the Salesforce world towards DevOps over the last year or so. Teams with a robust DevOps strategy will be embracing practices such as version control, continuous integration, automation, and automated testing, as well as backup. With these tools and processes in place, teams have more confidence in their deployments because they have fast release cycles. They can reliably manage parallel projects, and they know that their orgs are resilient against disaster. All this helps them to deliver innovative changes, provide more value to end users, and ultimately drive business growth. If you find yourself running into issues as your team grows in complexity, it's a sign that your processes also need to grow and reach that next level of maturity. As your DevOps process improves and matures, you'll start to reap more benefits. So here is Gearset's DevOps maturity model, and this helps us to assess a team's level of DevOps maturity. By looking at things like processes, tooling, and performance, we can see roughly where they might sit on the maturity scale, and then identify likely challenges and common next steps to take. The key is that the DevOps adoption is an incremental process, and it's good to approach it as a series of stages. Let's walk through each of these 5 stages and look at how we characterize them. The first stage is beginner. Teams in this stage haven't really started DevOps adoption. They deploy to production very infrequently, and long-running in-org projects mean changes often wait for a long time before getting released. When the changes are released, there's normally a lot to deploy all in one go, which brings with it tricky and time-consuming deployments and a higher likelihood of post-deployment issues. These teams are almost always using change sets, and pretty much everything to do with a release is performed manually. Moving away from change sets is an important way to graduate beyond the beginner stage and will dramatically speed up deployment time, as well as increase the deployment success rate. For example, teams using Gearset for their deployments do so up to 12 times faster than change sets, and on average, 91% of their deployments work first time. Next, we have the novice. Novice teams have realized that change sets can be a bottleneck and don't really work for teams wanting to make more frequent or complex changes. They're usually using a third-party tool for their deployments instead. They still don't deploy super frequently, and when they do, it's still directly org to org, but it happens more frequently than before because their tools have made it less painful. In this group, there's still no true version control adoption or other types of automation, but novice teams occasionally use version control as a metadata backup, where they periodically commit the metadata from production to version control. Although this isn't using version control for true source-driven development, it does help teams familiarize themselves with the basics of interacting with Git. To move to the next step here, teams need to adopt version control more fully. Version control lays the foundation that will unlock all the benefits of a mature DevOps process. So stage 3 here is the practitioner. These folks are a good way along the DevOps journey. They are usually releasing at the end of weekly or bi-weekly sprints, but long-running projects aren't always released in slices, so some change can still be left waiting to be deployed for months. These teams normally use version control as a source of truth for at least some metadata types. Some changes are still made outside of a source-driven process, usually due to siloed admin and dev teams. Teams that are new to using version control might be using it in a slightly unconventional way that mirror their old processes, rather than in the way it could be most impactful. However, version control opens the doors to automation, and it's common to see continuous integration and a move towards a process of continuous delivery at this stage, at least for the earlier environments in the release pipeline, like integration and UAT. The key to moving beyond this stage is to make the most of automation and adopt robust version control workflows across all areas of the team. Teams in stage 4 are leaders. They release at least once per sprint, and features rarely languish for longer than a sprint without being released. Their lead time may be slowed down, however, as they often depend on external teams for approvals. Version control is used as a source of truth, and most metadata types are deployed via version control. On the whole, the entire team are following the same process using tools that suit them. Some might use the DX and Git CLIs. Others might use third-party tools like Gearset to get their changes into and out of Git. But regardless of the exact tool they use, the process is the same. They've also unlocked the benefits of end-to-end CI/CD, which saves time and increases agility for the team. The key way to move beyond this stage is to make sure the process is reliable and resilient, with automated and on-demand backups of data and metadata integrated into the DevOps cycle to allow for a rapid and accurate recovery when things go wrong. The last stage is the Luminary stage, and it's quite rare to find a team ticking all of these boxes. They've managed to overcome the organizational challenges that hold teams in the leader category back, which means they have few or no external dependencies, slowing down their change process. This means they ship regularly, often daily, and whenever they've got new changes to deliver. The frequency of shipping actually dramatically reduces the complexity of their process because they only rarely need to hold subsets of changes back at release time. Backup adoption in this group is high. Having robust backup and restore tools, processes, and strategies ensures business continuity in the case of a disaster, and is the final piece of the DevOps puzzle. It gives teams the confidence to introduce innovative solutions because they trust their release process and its recoverability. Even better, teams that use the same tool for releases and backups can restore data using their familiar deployment workflows, making the process even faster. So we've gone through the different stages of DevOps maturity and seen what makes each step different from the last. As I said at the start, it's important to remember the DevOps adoption is a step-by-step process. Identify where you sit on that model and think about what you can do to get to the next step. It can be daunting to figure out where to begin with improving your DevOps process, but there are a few things you can do to get a plan up and running. First, you need to analyze what your company is looking to get out of Salesforce and create some goals. And think ahead. Your current release process might just about support your current workload, but it may not do so as you grow. Then you can build a roadmap to success. Make sure the team is aligned on what you want to achieve and split the work up into manageable chunks. It's important not to rush ahead and layer on DevOps complexity too quickly. It's a stepping stone approach to success. When planning this roadmap, you'll need to evaluate what DevOps tooling you need, whether it's first-party tooling or a complete DevOps solution like Gearset. Figure out what your process will look like, and then find tools that will make that possible without months of implementation and ramp-up time. Measuring DevOps performance as you scale your process is really important too. Try and identify the metrics that matter to you and start tracking them. For example, the frequency of the team's releases. By understanding the impact that DevOps is having, you'll be able to make gradual improvements and keep tweaking your process to align with your long-term scalable goals. Whatever stage you're at with your current development process and release process, I hope this talk has helped you to assess where you stand in terms of DevOps maturity and given you some insight into the next steps your team should take. It's been a pretty quick introduction to DevOps maturity, But at Gearset, we have many resources that can help you evaluate your maturity in more depth. My email address is here on the slide, so just drop me a message if you would like to see some of the documentation, or if you'd like to have more in-depth conversations with one of the team.